Let's go into the other game. You talked about Pennsylvania football not exactly putting out exciting product this weekend. The Philadelphia Eagles will be traveling to Tampa Bay. Another rematch of a game we saw earlier this season. That one was a 28-22 Thursday night football game where it was a little bit of a backdoor cover that kind of makes it look a little bit closer than it actually was.
Yes, that's right.
8.5 points Tampa is getting. And this is a very different Tampa team, and it's going to be hard to evaluate in the long run. I won't just isolate this analysis to just this game when we talk about Tampa here, but I will say losing Godwin to the ACL and Antonio Brown losing his mind are two things that are going to impact this roster going into a deeper playoff run. Obviously, it's going to be a lot of Mike Evans. That's who's going to have to pick up the slack in the passing game. Rob Gronkowski, of course, in the short and intermediate. And I think they're going to have to rely a lot more on the rushing attack with Leonard Fournette. I think that's going to be the big key for them to really making a deep playoff run this time around, because I don't think that they'll be able to just continuously air it out. I know that they have guys who have stepped up for them in recent weeks, especially with the Godwin injury, especially with losing AB, but counting on Scotty Miller, counting on Grayson, Cyril.
Oh, you mean the made up name of Cyril Grayson, who's not going to play because he's unlikely to play on Sunday?
Yes, the total Madden creative player that is Cyril Grayson. Exactly. So that's
zero college receptions, Cyril Grayson. Yes.
Yeah, that's where the Buccaneers offense is. And while I still have belief in Tom Brady, their offensive system under Bruce Arians, and certainly their defense, I think their defense is also going to be a big story here. It does limit them. They're not the same team that we came into the season expecting them to be. Does that mean they're not a Super Bowl team? I won't go that far. I still have them as a top 4 team currently in this remaining bracket. And that just goes with the GOAT. That just goes with Tom Brady being on their team. You're just never going to count them out as long as they have that quarterback lining up under center. As far as for the Philadelphia Eagles, some things that I'll say nicely about them here. They are not as bad as I thought they were going to be at the start of the year. To steal one of your common phrases here. They're not as bad as I thought they were, because I came into the season, I believe I had them winning 4 games in the preseason analysis, and they made it to the playoffs. And yes, they picked apart the bad teams, but there's a lot of bad teams that can't beat other bad teams. So if you beat enough of those bad teams to go 8-1 against under 500 teams, then you end up in the playoffs. And is that a flawed system? I think not, because at the end of the day, you just got to beat who's in front of you. And if you end up in the playoffs, that's your reward. So congratulations to Philadelphia Eagles for making it this far. I don't know what that's going to mean for like Jalen Hurts in the long term. I don't know what that's going to mean for Nick Sirianni in the long term. It does give them a little bit of equity as both of them progress as a head coach in the league and progress as a quarterback in the league, whether Jalen Hurts is going to be a starter or a backup for the next 10 years. I think he's earned himself a little bit of NFL job stability.
Yeah. And if Brian Flores, the best reason people can say for getting fired is, well, he didn't make the playoffs in 3 years. Nick Sirianni is going to probably in 2 years have a similar resume to Brian Flores, but at least he has this one playoff appearance they can point to, which, by the way, if it had been 2 years ago, wouldn't have made the playoffs because there were only 6 teams making the playoffs. Another place where the tiebreakers were wrong. I'm not as upset about this as the Titans and the Chiefs, but the tiebreakers were wrong about keeping the Saints out of the playoffs over the Philadelphia Eagles, because the Eagles are probably the 9th best team in the NFC this year.
I'd rather see the Eagles than the Saints. We've gone back and forth with it. I do not want to see the Saints in the playoffs. They're boring.
But at least the Saints defense is good. Like
the Saints
at least the
defense, okay, fine. The Saints defense is at least a top 10 unit in the NFL, I would say.
You're telling me you wouldn't have wanted to see Saints Bucks Part 3 after the Bucks haven't beaten the Saints in the regular season in the last 2 years? That would have been so exciting in the playoffs this weekend. Instead, we get to watch an Eagles team where the only good thing I've heard about them this entire week is, well, they're good at running the football. Well, you know who's not playing? Miles Sanders. You know who they are playing? The best rush defense of the last 10 years in the NFL. So good luck to them on that one. I commend you for your efforts, Philadelphia, for getting here and playing this meaningless playoff game that maybe is not so meaningless to you. Because again, you're here because you played Washington and the Giants 4 times and you won those games. So credit to you for that one. But we know the Philadelphia Eagles are like the 9th best team in the NFC. It's fine. The Tampa Bay side is interesting because I'm super fascinated to see them either play the Rams or the Cowboys. I'm not even going to pencil in the Cowboys beating the 49ers. I know we're not going to preview that game here, but Cowboys are a better team than the 49ers, but I'm not going to pencil that in as a victory. But regardless of who they play, I think it's going to be so fascinating to watch that matchup in the next round, which we'll obviously get to. If we're going to talk about that next week, the thing I'm interested about here is no Ronald Jones, which means Le'Veon Bell is the backup. Giovanni Bernard is supposed to be healthy for them. So I guess that's like Le'Veon Bell-esque. He does similar type things as Le'Veon Bell at this point. So that'll help out a little bit. Fournette's going to play. No Cyril Grayson, no Ronald Jones, no Chris Godwin, no Antonio Brown. Is OJ Howard still there? I haven't heard from OJ Howard very much recently.
You bring up a valid point. I feel like his name just fell off the face of the earth. He was coming back from the ACL injury last year, correct?
Yeah, I think so. I know he was out for all the year last year, but I feel like we talk about how they don't have enough weapons anymore, which, fair enough for them. Like they have gone through an unholy mess of injuries this year. But I'm like, where is OJ Howard? If you're desperately looking for targets, it looks like OJ Howard hasn't really played since November. So I don't know if he's injured or
not on their offense, but I would also say Richard Sherman, I just saw went on the season ending IR. So that's a shot to their defensive secondary.
Yeah, I think them getting Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy Bunting back alleviated a lot of the problems that they had early in the season where we're like, oh my God, you just can't stop anyone. So, Jalen Hurts isn't necessarily a high flying passing attack because he also has one of the worst completion percentages in the NFL among qualified starters this year. So that's not going to be something they exploit there. The only way that the Buccaneers have a chance of losing is if Tom Brady throws 3 interceptions, and you say there's no chance that's going to happen, but Tom Brady threw 5 interceptions in the playoffs last year. So it's entirely possible that Tom Brady does do some dumb shit, but that's the only way this game doesn't go to Tampa Bay. Tampa's going to win. Gronk's probably going to have a bunch of catches because now Gronk's one of the de facto wide receiver ones. I used to make jokes for years that Mike Evans was always just wide receiver 7 in fantasy football. So that Mike Evans just exists to be wide receiver 7. He's gone 8 straight years with 1,000 yards. And I'm looking at it like, oh, Mike Evans might be a Hall of Famer. We can start having that conversation.
Definitely a Hall of Famer. No doubt. He's a Hall of Famer.
He's got numbers that kind of back up these, like one of these fringe guys, but I've never thought of Mike Evans as like one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I've always thought of him as like a second group of guys, just consistently very, very good. It also explains the Johnny Manziel thing a lot better now that we know Mike Evans is a Hall of Fame level wide receiver and also looks a little bit like Juju. Do the side by side of Mike Evans and Juju. It's quite funny to look at it. So yeah, I think the Buccaneers are going to be fine. They still have 2 Hall of Fame weapons that Tom Brady can throw to, and just a Tyler Johnson over here, who I actually think is really good. Like we don't talk about Tyler Johnson a lot. If he were on another team, he'd probably be a wide receiver 2 on some of these really bad teams in the NFL. Like Tyler Johnson's like the 6th best player in the Bucs receiving core, and he might be a top 60 wide receiver in the NFL or top 60 target in the NFL. So I think he can have a more integral part of the offense. Possibly he can be like their Alan Lazard for the next couple weeks. That's about all I can do on Tampa analysis. Tampa's going to win the game. It's on at 10 o'clock on a Sunday, so I guess we're used to watching football at this time. But if you really do want to watch Steelers and Chiefs, this might be the game that you skip this weekend if you need a break from the NFL action.
Yeah, pretty much on the Sunday. It's looking like the afternoon game might be the only redeemable one at this current juncture in time, but who knows? It could be a surprise. There's playoff magic in the air. Stuff happens. Obviously, we didn't expect Taylor Heineke to give the Buccaneers as much of a game as he did, and that ended up being an exciting thing that gave Taylor Heineke more NFL years than he's probably worth.
Yeah, and the thing that I point to all the time with the Bucs defense is like over the last 2 years might be the best rush defense we've seen in the NFL in the last 10 years. But also Antonio Gibson ran at will on them in the regular season this year. So maybe there's hope that something falls apart here. By the way, I said this as a throwaway line, but I can't get away from the fact that you look exactly like Mike Evans. It's really kind of freaky now that I look at it right now. Your face looks just like Mike Evans with the thick beard there, the widow's peak coming in a little bit right there. Like you got some Mike Evans vibes on you.
Now, see, the problem is I don't have Mike Evans' vertical, his height, his reach advantage. Like if you put something on that other side of that room, I'm not able to just grab it like he is out of the air. Like he's just picking, like, was it a duck egg is what they called it? Like whenever you just grab like a ball so perfectly. Thank you. I will take that.